All right. Good morning, everybody. If you would just get off the bat here, would you please just let me know if you can hear me or not? Just make sure sound is good. And then after that, we can get going. So what I'm going to do is hopefully you can hear me. If you haven't been on here before, basically I see there's a lot of questions that have been posted before we even got started here. So I'm going to be doing the questions that come in during the office hours. So we asked if you would please just post during the office hours and not before, because I want to make sure that I'm answering questions for those people that are actually here, and not people that just post questions and then they have to go do something, if that makes sense. So if you've already posted a question, please post it again. That way we can get started here. So I'll go ahead and I'll start here with Steve B. He asked, when I do the right toe back drill, right toe back drill, not sure exactly what drill, I just pure about every shot with great compression. Then I get back to my regular stance. I'm just not as consistent. Any idea why or what I should be aware of? Thanks. So I'm not sure exactly what drill he's talking about, right toe back. I will say, if you hit a ball better with a certain stance, I would maybe think about adopting that stance. There's nothing that says you can't have an open or a closed stance of your foot. If you're talking about how your right foot, if you're a right-handed golfer and your right foot is open and you're getting better compression and things, well, that's going to help you to rotate a little bit more. So not sure if that's actually what you're referring to, but if you're set up, I have the club here. If I'm set up here and it's more aesthetically pleasing to have your feet kind of straight forward like this, right? That's more aesthetically pleasing to be like that, but it's going to be hard to rotate because when you rotate your hips back, your leg is internally rotating. Your leg is doing that. So if you are straight like this, it's going to be a little bit harder to rotate. So if you just rotate this foot out a little bit to begin with, I have terrible internal rotation on both of my legs. So I actually flare both of my feet out. So that way it just makes it easier for me to turn. And it doesn't matter in the follow through because I'm going to be able to turn back, and then the follow through, I'm rolling up on my foot. So that doesn't really matter. And then the backswing, if we're talking about external rotation, that's not going to be limited because I can lift up this heel to ease up on that if I need to. If you're hitting the ball, I'm not sure exactly if this is what you're saying, but if you're hitting the ball better with this as opposed to this, there's nothing wrong with being like that. So if that's not what you're referring to, I'm not sure exactly what drill that is that you're talking about, James. Sorry, Steve. So James M says, yesterday's round, I hit 3 shots with my driver that looked like a sand wedge, straight up, really high, and went about 100 yards. So that's more of a statement and not really a question. But it sounds like you're probably hitting the ball off the top of the face. So if you're hitting balls like that, you're probably coming in. This is a hybrid, but you get the idea. You're probably coming in, the ball's up on a tee, and you're probably coming in and hitting it off the top part of the face here, and it's shooting straight up in the air. That's what I would imagine. I would look at your driver, see if you have any marks on top of there. That's probably what's going on, is you're just coming in and hitting the top of the face. So what I'd try to do is I'd try to hit lower on the face to get it closer to the sweet spot. All right. So Richard S. says, I asked yesterday, but I wasn't able to stay online. I'm 64 and my handicap is 3. My misses tend to be on the heel of the club. I spray foot powder on my driver, and the majority of my misses are towards the heel. A friend of mine thinks I'm taking the club back too much on the inside. I tend to draw the ball. Thanks for any help. So I kind of went over this yesterday, but basically your takeaway, I think it's interesting that people are really seem to be obsessed with the takeaway. And honestly, you know, it's not the only reason why you'd not want to bring the club inside is if you're coming way over the top. So if you're someone you're seeing that you're swinging way over the top, then bringing the club way inside is going to hurt you, because what happens is when you bring the club way inside, you tend to, the momentum of the club is going in this direction. Whereas if you take the club more outside the hands, it's like the opposite effect, right? It helps you shallow it and work from the inside. Since you said you're a natural drawer of the ball, or what it seems, you're not swinging over the top. Most likely, you're likely swinging from the inside. So I would say taking the club back more on plane or more outside your hands is probably going to either make no difference for you, or it may make you draw even more. It may make you come from the inside even more, because you're going to have that momentum moving in that direction more. So probably not something you want to worry about. It's impossible to say 100% for sure without seeing your swing, but I would say that's probably not an issue. I would say, Richard, for you, the easiest thing to do for you, and I've said this in every single office hours, is people who talk about how they're hitting the ball on the heel or they're hitting the ball on the toe every single time. The easiest thing to do is to exaggerate the opposite. So if you're someone who's hitting it on the heel, like Richard is a lot, then you are just line up to the ball the way that you normally would and intentionally hit it out on the toe. Same thing goes if you're hitting it on the toe. Line up as you normally would, which most people lining it up on the center of the face, intentionally strike it off the heel. So now let's say that you're someone who hits it off the heel. You try to intentionally strike it off the toe, and then you actually strike it off the toe. Well, in that case, just ease off of that feeling a little bit. Or let's say you intentionally try to strike it off the toe, but you still strike it off the heel. Well, you need to exaggerate that even more, maybe even to the point to where if this pin is the golf ball, you have the feeling that you're coming in and you're missing the ball like that. You may need to exaggerate it to that point to get to where, because what will likely happen, what happens most of the time, if you're someone who's striking on the heel and you try to strike it on the toe, most of the time that strike ends up more in the center of the club face. And, that's ideal what you want. That's going to be the easiest thing to do. And you know what? And eventually your feel is going to change and you're going to actually start hitting it off the toe. Well, that's good. If you're intentionally hitting off the toe and you're actually hitting off the toe, that means that you're calibrated. You're good to go. And then at that point, you just try to hit it off the center of the face. So a lot of what golf is adjusting your feel to get the desired result that you want. So that's basically what that is there, is just adjusting your feel to get the desired result that you want. Now, if you're looking for the technical reason why, and I can tell you what I see most of the time, the technical reason why you might be striking the ball off the heel a lot is what I see is in the downswing is the butt goes like this. So we get here. So if I line my backside up with the edge of this vent, so here I am at address. I go up to the top, my backside's still on that vent, and then in the downswing, what I see is this. So when you do that and you don't rotate open, you just kind of thrust your hips kind of forward. What happens is you're taking away the space for your hands and arms to move through, and that hosel moves closer to the golf ball. So that's what I see most of the time. So you'll want to take a look at that. And early extension is basically what that is. So I would take a look at early extension drills. But the easiest thing for you to do would just be to try to strike the ball more off the toe to move it toward the center. All right, so let me get a drink here real quick. Now I'm going to try, and one thing as well is I'm going to try to go through these a little bit faster and not spend a lot of time on every one of them, just because there's a lot of questions I want to make sure I can get to as many as possible. So James M says, thanks for being so patient. I've been playing for a long time. Don't want to say how long. No one ever has told me that no one ever told me at the top of the swing, you do the move and the downswing lag and the release. I played all the years just with my arms. Now when I try to lag, sometimes I do it and sometimes my arms take over. Please, can you go through the whole swing from the backswing to the move and lag? Well, I mean, I can do. So basically, what it is in the backswing. Let me angle this down a little bit. So really, in the backswing, like I was saying, as far as takeaway is concerned, it's depending on what you're doing in the downswing, your takeaway is not that important. So you just have to think about the as far as inside or outside. Now, takeaway as far as making sure that you're getting nice and wide and getting the shoulders involved early, that's very important for distance. Because if you're someone who just picks the club up and doesn't turn the shoulders, you're gonna have a hard time getting distance. So we definitely, I mean, I'm not saying the takeaway isn't important, but as far as how the club's coming up outside, inside, in line with the hands, it's not as important as a lot of people think it is. It just depends on if you're swinging over the top. But so takeaway, bringing the club back, and then as soon as you get to the top here, you get in this position at the top. Ideally, you want to have kind of a flat left wrist here, or lead wrist. And then from there, it's turning the doorknob to the right. All right. So if you're standing from my perspective, you're turning the doorknob to the right and you're turning the handle out. So if you watch me here, I'm turning that handle. That's what I'm doing at the top. I'm turning that handle out. Now it's an exaggeration, but that's basically what happening is I'm turning to the right and I'm turning the handle out. And then from there, I'm just rotating into impact. So what I can tell you, James, is you want to go to the tennis racket drill and the move. That's going to be that drill that's going to help you get the right feeling of shallowing out, squaring the club early, because that's what we're doing. We're shallowing out. The club is shallowing out. And then we're squaring the face early by turning the door or turning the handle down. And that's the tennis racket drill right there. Because if you have the tennis racket, right, you're getting that to point out to the sky, and then you're getting it to point away from you toward the camera here. And then from there, it's just rotating into impact. Like I said, that's an exaggeration, but that's basically what's happening in the golf swing as far as the move is concerned. All right, so James T says, knockdown tee shot on a par 3, tee or no tee. If you ever have the opportunity to put the ball on a tee, I like to put the ball on tee. That's what I prefer. The only time I would say, with a knockdown shot, you're usually trying to do that without a lot of spin. So let's say if I have this wedge here, I'll grab this wedge. So typically when you're trying to hit a knockdown shot, it's because you're into the wind or something like that. So backspin, a lot of backspin on a shot into the wind is not good because it's going to kill it. It's going to balloon up. So if you don't use a tee, what happens is that ball usually is sitting a little bit lower on the ground, and you come in and you hit it on the lower part of the face. So there's something that's called gear effect. And what that means is if you hit the ball off center, that ball is always going to tend to want to roll toward the center of the face. So off center, even lower on the face. So the dead center of the face would be, right there, halfway up the face, about right there. That's usually not where you strike the ball just because the ball's sitting on the ground. But what happens is if you hit it on the lower grooves here, that ball will crawl up the face a little bit. So if we look at it from this angle, the ball's going to crawl up the face a little bit. So when that happens, you're adding spin to the ball. So if you don't use a tee, the ball's sitting lower on the ground, you have more of a chance of that ball crawling up the face. So if you're on the tee box, I'd say any opportunity you have to use a tee, unless you're intentionally trying to put more spin on the ball, I would definitely use a tee. And even if you are trying to put more spin on the ball, I would still put the ball on a tee because it's going to be easier to hit if you hit it off of a tee. And then it's also, I would just try to intentionally try to get it on the lower grooves to get a little bit more spin on it. So hopefully that makes sense. Flamingo, Steve B says flamingo drill. I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with what that drill is. I'm assuming that's in reference to a previous question. Oh yeah, the toe back drill. Sorry, I'm not familiar with what the flamingo drill is. Sorry about that. So Gordon F says, when looking to increase lag when using the move, the back of the left hand faces up. Do I need to pronate my wrist at the top, or is the wrist being pronated just before the top of the backswing when starting the downswing with my right shift? All right. So basically, if you're talking about pronation, that's outward movement, and then supination would be inward movement, right? So what's happening? You don't want to get the wrist. I mean, in the backswing, your wrist is going to pronate. If you're looking at, if you're looking at the left wrist in the backswing, naturally it's going to pronate a little bit as you're keeping the club on plane, right? But as you start the downswing, or as you're getting up to the top, you don't want to continue to go like this too much, because what's going to happen is you get here, and then the downswing, you want to do that. So what I would do is I get the position, right? You're pronating a little bit because you have to keep the club on plane. Because let's say if I don't pronate my wrist, I do this, right? So you have to pronate a little bit to get the club to get on plane. It just feels more natural. It's not, it's not probably something that you're really having to think about you're doing. You're doing that to keep the club on plane. And then at the top here, you want to pronate it even more. That's the left wrist, right? And then get that turning into impact. So you don't want to feel like you're like this in the backswing, and then you do that in the downswing. You want to get the club here and then drop it down to get it to shallow out, because otherwise you're probably going to end up coming over the top. All right, so Reed F says, Clay speaks of a cupping of the right hand slightly skyward at the top of the swing, and just as you make a slight drop of the arms below the plane of the backswing. Might you speak to this movement of the hands? So this is just like shallowing out the club. So if you're right-handed, so whenever we talk about cupping or bowing, so cupping is going to be the knuckles going back toward the elbow, and then bowing is going to be the palm of the hand going toward the elbow. So when you talk about cupping of the wrist at the top of the swing, that's shallowing out the club, right? So if my wrist is straight, the club is like that. If I cup it, it's like that. So that's shallowing out the club. And bowing of the wrist is squaring up the face. That's also, cupping of the wrist is also squaring up the face if you're right-handed with the right wrist. So that's basically what that's doing, is it's shallowing out. And then as you're coming into impact, what you're going to see with most players or most good ball strikers is at impact, the right wrist is going to have a little bit of bend back in it. It's going to have a little bit of cup in it. That left wrist is either going to be flat or slightly bowed. Some players, it's really, really bowed. But typically it's going to be in a position like that where you're slightly bent back. With most amateurs, what you see at impact is the right wrist. It's pretty straight. It's like this. You see a little bit of cupping in the left hand, and the club is releasing early. So that pet the grass drill from the straight line release section, that's a great drill for getting the feeling of right wrist up here, bent back. And as you're coming into impact, it's staying bent back and then releasing out in front. All right, so Dennis says, I tend to early extend on some shots and feel that the weight has shifted on my toes on the downswing. Do you feel a drill for balance and footwork? So I would, the reason why you may be doing that, why you're getting out on your toes, is probably what I most often see is because you're probably steep with the club in the downswing. So what I mean by that is in the downswing, this club gets kind of steep like this. So it's more vertical. Now, this is an exaggeration. Usually it's more like that. But what we want to have is we want to have the club like that, nice and shallowed out and working down that right forearm, as we can see there, and nice and shallowed out, and that butt end of the club pointing out toward the golf ball, even a little bit outside of it. But we see most of the time is we see that butt end of the club pointing would be inside the golf ball. And when we get like that, we have to stand up to get that club to work down on plane. Because if you don't, you're going to swing over the top or you're going to chop down into the ball. So because we're good athletes, we don't swing over the top, right? And we don't want to chop down into the ball. So what do? We kind of stand up to get this club to drop down and to be on plane. When you stand up, you get out on your toes. So what I would look at is, I would look at if you're shallowing out the club or not. Look at your swing from this view, from down the line, all right? Right down your toe line, right down the hands, and be about waist level and be far away enough with the camera that you can get the whole swing in there. You don't want to be super close, otherwise the views will look a little bit off. But basically, I get up and I pause your swing when you're about parallel to the ground in the downswing with the lead arm. Now, see where that butt end of the club is pointing. Is it pointing at the golf ball, outside of the golf ball, inside of the golf ball? If you're anywhere inside of the golf ball, you're steep. So you're going to want to work on shallowing out the club, and that's going to help you stay in your posture the best. So that's the number one thing I see. But again, it's hard for me to know for sure what's going on. But you're getting out on your toes is probably a result of that because you're coming up out of your posture because you're steep. Most people don't come out of their posture just because. They come out of their posture because the club is too steep and they have to stand up to get shallow out late. All right, so Steve B comes back and says, actually right foot back on my toe. So I'm not really sure exactly what you're talking about. Mark H says, struggling with the turn as I protract and retract my shoulders. How are my ribs moving? Struggling with the turn as I retract and protract my shoulders. How are my ribs moving? I would say your ribs aren't really moving. Your ribs don't move anywhere. I mean, you're turning your torso, but your ribs aren't really moving around. What retraction and protraction is just, so protraction is forward of the shoulders. So if you think about your shoulder blades are moving away from your spine, that's protraction. And then retraction is shoulder blades toward the spine. So when you turn up to the top, your left shoulder is moving away from your spine, and your right shoulder is moving toward your spine. And then the downswing, kind of the opposite happens, right? So in your straight line release, your right shoulder is moving away from the spine, and your left shoulder is kind of moving back away from it. So that's all that is. Your ribs aren't really, they're not moving around or anything. They're staying where they are. Your torso is turning and your ribs are going with it. I'm not sure exactly what you're asking there for the most part. Charles S says, on the power fade, I know the club face should be slightly open to the path. In order to keep the club face open is keeping the right hand under the club to help delay the closing. So yeah, you're exactly right. Whenever you're trying to hit a fade, the club face has to be open to the path. The key to hitting a power fade is de-lofting the face, because what happens is when you are hitting a power fade, usually when you're just hitting a fade in general, because it involves having the face open to the path, a lot of people come in and they add loft to the face to get the face to open, right? So if we're looking at it, if we're opening the face, see how it adds loft. If I keep the shaft lean the same and I open the face, it adds loft. If I close the face, I lose loft. So this is why a lot of people hit draws further than fades, because they're de-lofting the face typically when they're hitting a draw. The key to a power fade, and this is what Dustin Johnson does, Bubba Watson, the key to hitting a power fade and not losing distance is when you're opening the face, you also have to have more forward shaft lean to counteract for that. So to hit a true power fade, you not only have to have the face open to the path, but you've got to have more forward shaft lean in order to keep the loft off of there. That way you're getting true power out of it. So what I would just try to feel like the club is working from the inside still, and you're getting a lot of forward shaft lean, and you're holding that face open. So that way you get that face open to the path, and you're getting that forward shaft lean. There's some great videos on the website. If you just go, I mentioned this in every office hours. There's a great search function on the website. If you go in the upper right-hand corner of about any web page, I'm not sure if it's on this one, but in the upper right-hand corner, there's a search box. search power fade. You'll probably find a few videos on that, and it'll go over basically a lot of what I was just talking about and some good drills to do with that. So I definitely check those out. Paul G. Let me get a drink here real quick. Paul G says, I've been working on shallowing my swing as you teach. Hitting mid to short irons great. Longer clubs, I block. So what a block is, it's basically a ball that starts to the right and then doesn't have much curvature on it, just goes straight right. So what that is a product of, it's a product of you're getting this path to move out to the right. Your club path is moving, it's inside out, but you're leaving that face open. So you're going to want to get that club face to where it's closing more, it's squaring up more, and you're getting into impact with a square club face. So that's going to be 1.2 from the move section. So if you just go to the move and go to drill 1.2, I think it's called like compress the heck out of the ball or something like that. And what that drill is going to do is going to get you to where you're turning the handle down to square it up. Because what you're doing is you're coming in and the face is open. You're not turning that handle down enough. So I would get to where you're actually hitting some hooks, because that will be overdoing it. And then at that point, you just have to ease off of it. So get to where you're turning that handle down, bowing that left wrist more as you're coming into impact. That will help you straightened out. All right, Mike A says trouble getting the club in the slot. So it all comes back to shallowing, right? So the first thing you got to do, if you're having trouble getting the club in the slot, it's probably because you're steep early. So you've got to get this club shallowed out, pointing more toward the golf ball. You got to get to where you're rotating. And as you can see there, now I got that club working in the slot. So get to where you're shallowing that club out first, and that'll make it much easier to get that club in the slot. If you're coming down steep, the only way to really get that club in the slot, if you're coming down steep, is to come up out of your posture and then have that club go under, drop down like that. And that makes your swing very, very timing based, and it's very, very difficult to play good golf doing that. So I'd make sure that you're shallowing out the club early, like we talked about in the move first. That's going to be tennis racket drill. I'll take a look at that one. William F says, what are the causes of a club crossing the target line at the top of the swing? Cupping the wrist, not shallowing, etc. So as far as crossing the line at the top, I believe that's what he's talking about. What is the causes of a club crossing the target line? Yeah. So if we talk about the club, when we mean by cross the line is that the club's basically not in line with the target. For those of you who aren't familiar with what that means. So basically, ideally, you would have the club pointing pretty much at the target or parallel to your target line at the top. And what that does for you is there's no momentum going in either direction that's going to cause some issues in the downswing. So this is kind of like the takeaway. If the club is going across the line at the top, but you're bringing the club down nicely on plane in the downswing, then it's not a problem. But if you got the club going across the line at the top, you're way across the line, and then when you pull down, that club drops way underneath, and you're swinging way too much into out or maybe even getting stuck, well, now that might be an issue that you want to take a look at. So a lot of times what causes that, what I see the number one cause in people who go across the line is that they're with their right hand, with the trail hand, if you're right-handed, they're coming up the top, and they're, in order to get more more of a length of the swing, to lengthen the swing, they push this out. They push that right hand out. So the right hand is more flat and pushing the club. And then in the downswing, they go like that. So, or a lot of times in the downswing, they just come straight down and come over the top. But if you want to get to where this club is not way, way across the line, you got to get to where I feel like you're a waiter. So you're going up the top and you're holding a tray here at the top. So if I put that club in my hand now and I have it, see how it's more in line or even a little bit laid off. And then from there, it's going to be easy to get the club to shallow out and turn into impact. But if you get here, you can probably get a little bit more club head speed by going like this. But like I said, you're going to have momentum issues in the downswing. So I think that's why a lot of people do it, is because they're trying to get a little bit more length in the arc of their swing, which they're getting. But again, that causes issues. So I just try to feel like you're up on like you're a waiter, you're holding it at the top. That's going to get that club more on plane. Or I would pick something way out. Like I got Grubby over here, mascot of the school I went to. So I try to feel like as I'm going up the top, I'm trying to get the club pointed at him, and then I'm coming down. So it might be a tree when you're at the driving range, this side of the driving range, and try not to get the club pointing at the other side of the room. That's what I would try to feel like. All right, so William P. asks, I'm having trouble getting loft out of the bunkers. So what I see a lot of times with people is they don't open the face enough with the wedge. You want to get that face pointing pretty much straight up in the air. So that's the first thing I do. I'd be making sure that you're using a wedge, 60 degree, 56 degree at least. And then I'd be opening up that face. So turning that in your hand. So if we're looking down here, so this would be a square club face. So I'd be turning that grip in your hand like that. So where the face is just open like that. And there you go. That's what you want. And then you're using that to slide underneath the golf ball and through the sand. And that allows you to use the bounce of the club. Because as you can see here, I've got this flange on the bottom of the club. If I don't have loft here, that now I'm exposing this leading edge. That's going to dig into the sand. What I want to do is I want to get a lot of loft here. And then also I have this bounce here so that when it acts as a rudder, as you go into the sand, it slides through the sand and the club goes underneath the ball and it pops it up in the air. So make sure that you're opening up the face enough to get loft out of there. All right, so that's one of the main things I see. The other main thing I see out of the bunkers is people just don't accelerate. They're afraid to swing hard out of the bunker. So it just takes practice to get used to seeing the ball come out a certain way when you swing at a certain speed. And once you get more comfortable with that, it becomes easier to do. All right, so Jeff M says, I just got to use 5 wood with a jumbo grip. All my other clubs are regular grips, but I can hit it just fine. Should I get it recrypt to keep all my clubs as consistent as possible? Sounds like you just answered your question. You hit it just fine. So I will tell you, it doesn't make – I've had normal grips and I've had mid-size grips on my clubs. I can tell you it doesn't make any difference for me. But for some people, it does. It's more of a feel thing. It's a personal preference. Honestly, if you can hit your 5 wood just fine, then with a jumbo grip on it, then, it's more just feel. If you want to kind of match your other clubs in the same feel as the other clubs, then sure, go ahead and get it replaced. But if not, you may as well use it. And then once it wears out, maybe you can get it replaced then. But it honestly doesn't make that much of a difference. They've actually done studies and given people clubs with, all sorts of sizes of grips. And there's really been no sizable difference between people going from a narrow grip to a jumbo grip. It's more just feel and personal preference. And I would just do whatever feels good and feels, right in your hands. Obviously, if you have bigger hands, you might want a little bit bigger grips because it may feel like a narrow grip you can't quite get a hold of. So that's all I would be doing there. Probably wouldn't make that much of a difference. All right, so Gary G says, shallowing the club is very difficult because it involves so many moving parts. I agree. It can be very difficult. It's a lot of times for people, it's not a natural movement. Again, that's not really a question, but more of a statement. But, I agree. It's not an easy thing to grasp, especially if you're used to kind of swinging from the top and coming over the top. This is going to feel very, very foreign to you. But it just depends on the person, It doesn't have to involve so many moving parts. It's really just, it's not any more moving parts than coming over the top. It's just as many moving parts as doing this. It's just the opposite, right? So, yeah, it's just a matter of getting used to a new motor movement, basically. All right, so Gary G on here again, he says, why not simply set the club in the correct place last part of the backswing lower and flatter? So that's a good question. So why wouldn't you just want to set the club flat, be flat, and then just swing down flat? Well, the reason you can play great golf doing that. When you look at Matt Kuchar, he's won a lot of money on the PGA Tour with a very flat swing. The problem is that it's going to be really tough to get this. If you're really flat, you don't have a lot of space to get this club to accelerate and generate speed. So if you look at someone like Bubba Watson, who is the opposite of flat, he's very, very vertical, and he shallows out the club, then he's able to get a lot more speed. He's been tops on the PGA Tour and driving, at least like top 5 for a long, long time. So if you're really, really flat, it's arguable that you can be more consistent if you're more flat. But distance is such a huge part of this game, and really, advanced metrics and stuff like strokes gained and the stuff that Mark Brody is doing. It's becoming very, very obvious that distance is king in this game. It's actually way more. People who hit the ball further are really just as consistent as those who hit it short. So you may as well try to hit it long, because you're not going to make much of a difference in your consistency. So being a little bit more vertical, or even somewhere in between, like an Adam Scott or a Rory McIlroy, is a good place to be. But the con to that is you're going to have to bring the club down. You're going to have to reroute that club to get it to shallow out. But I'd much rather be longer and a little less consistent. And usually, you're just as consistent. So that's what I'd recommend. But especially for those who are struggling with distance. If you're someone who's struggling with distance, I'd do everything you can to get distance. And swinging flatter is going to be tough to get distance, especially if you're already struggling with it. All right. Richard S. says, thanks for the advice. Good stuff. No problem. Glad I could help. Gordon, let me get a drink real quick. All right. So Gordon F. says, when looking to increase lag when using the move, the back of the left hand faces up. I pronate the wrist by being pronated before the back. This is, I believe that's a repeat question. I think he posted it again, so I'm going to skip that one. Having issues with pulling the irons left. So most of the time an issue. So first of all, a pull is going to be where the club face is closed and your club path is moving to the left. So you're swinging out to in. You're swinging, if you're right-handed, which you said you're pulling to the left, so you're right-handed. It's an out to in club path. So you're probably coming over the top. I would go to our stop slide. Yeah, I know it's not a pull section, but slicing and pulling are a product of the same club path issue. It's a club path that's moving across the ball. The only difference is that on a pull, the face is closed, and on a slice, the face is more open. So if you go to that never slice again section, there's pretty much all the drills in there are focused on getting the club more into out, learning how to hit a draw. And if you can learn how to hit a draw, you can get rid of that pull. A draw that starts to the right and curves to the left anyway. So I go to the never slice again section and work through those drills, or really search over the top on the website. Lots of the drills to work on that. All right. Charles G says, sculling my chips over the green. What causes this? So if you're sculling your chips, what that means is you're most likely flipping the club. So you're coming in and the leading edge is getting up where the ball is, and you're hitting the ball with the leading edge. So what you want to do is get good at rushing the turf. And first, I would look at ball position. So I look at where your ball position is. You want to have it roughly in the middle of your stance. What I see a lot of people who struggle with chunking and sculling chips is they have the ball too far back. So if you look, if I have a ball here, this thing curls up on me. So if I have a ball here, a lot of times they have it too far back in their stance. So they have it like back here because they're trying to get that ball first contact. And what happens is they chunk it, they put the club in behind it, or they come in and they hit the top of the ball and it kind of sculls over. So what you want to do is you want to kind of move that to more the middle of your stance. So that way you're coming in and you're brushing the turf and getting that nice contact on there. So that's what I'd look at first, is I'd look at your ball position. And I would go to video 2.1. I believe it's 2.1 in the chipping mastery section. You want to work on, that's going to be working on setup and getting that brushing the turf motion and making sure that it's basically like the really basic setup and technique video for chipping. And it's really almost all you need as far as chipping is concerned. So I definitely look at that one and make sure that you're hitting all the points on there. All right, so Kenneth R says, while I'm up to date with my subscription, I no longer receiving the latest lessons by email. Please email our support team. That'll be support@topspeedgolf.com, Ken. So please email them and they will take care of that. Justin J, shot shaping. I'm having trouble with this. I always hit it straight. So not sure if you're in our ball striking masterclass, but I definitely check that out. So the ball striking masterclass is going to be all about hitting curving the shots and being able to control it. So if you're always hitting it straight, which not a lot of people will complain about that, but if you're trying to learn how to hit fades and draws and things like that, I would just try to exaggerate it. I would learn to hit a hook in a slice, and then all it is from there is toning it down. So what you need to do to hit a fade is to come in with a face that's open to the path. So I try to feel like I'm swinging way left with a way open face, and then then you'll get a big old slice. And then from there, I just try to tone it down and try to hit a little bit less of a slice until you're able to control it a little bit. Same thing with the draw. You're trying to come in with the face closed to the path. So I try to feel like I'm swinging in to out as much as possible, and I'm turning that handle down. I'm closing that club face as much as I can in there to get that ball to hook as much as I can. So once you get a good feeling for a hook, then you can just ease off of that and start to get to where you're hitting more of a draw instead of that. So the best way I can tell you is go to the extremes of both ends. Go to hit an extreme fade, which would be a slice, right? And now go to hit an extreme draw, which would be a hook. And I would get good at those. And then at that point, all it is toning it down. But if you're really looking for a course, I would definitely take a look at our ball striking masterclass if you're not in there already. All right, so Stephen B says, when I reduce the grip tension, the feeling is that I lose control over the blade and don't rotate the shaft at all. So tension is actually going to be changing throughout the swing. So, we talk about, you probably heard somebody say, you want to act like you're holding a baby bird at address, which at address, that's fine because there's no motion and anything going on. You want to feel kind of tension free a little bit, kind of nice and loose here at address. But as soon as that swing starts, that tension is increasing because you're in motion. You have to hold on to the club harder to be able to control it and hold on to it. Now, you don't want to have a death grip on that thing because you're not going to be able to, because if you hold your hand in a fist as hard as you can, you're going to have a hard time turning your wrist. So basically, you want to hold on to the club hard enough with enough firm pressure into it that you're able to control it, but you're also able to have movement. So you can kind of do some of these to get a good feeling for that, because that's going to give you an idea of how much you need to hold on to the club. But basically, you're really going to have a lot of tension in that club as you're coming into impact, because you have to be able to put force into this handle in order to hold on to the club. If you just hold it very, very lightly and you swing it as hard as you can without increasing that tension, you're just going to throw the club out of your hand. So you have to put force into that handle in order to swing it hard, in order to feel like you have control of it. So what I like to feel, I try to feel as tension free as you can with that right hand, but with that left hand, these first few, or with that lead hand, sorry for those of you who are lefties, I keep saying left and right instead of lead and trail, but with these first few fingers here, so pinky, ring, and middle finger, you want to have feel like you have a little bit more pressure in those. And I would feel like you're a little more loose in the other ones. and that's going to give you that control. You're going to be able to hold on to the club, and that's also going to create a fulcrum, because really your right hand or your trail hand is slowing down the club, you know, if you're really holding on to it. So you want to allow it to be really loose and allow the club to whip through there. So I would just try to have a little bit firmer pressure in these fingers right here to give you a little bit more control of the club. All right, so Jacob says, hi, looking to fix an over-the-top move, in particular with the driver, looking for 1 to 2 drills to fix this. So I would go on the website and search over the top. There'll be a ton of drills, and I'd also go to the Never Slice Again section and work through those drills. But basically, my favorite one is the one where you're exaggerating it as much as possible. Because basically what you're doing when you're going over the top, the problem with that is that you're swinging to the left. So that's going to be a pull or a slice motion. So what you want to do is, if you're on a mat, okay, and here's the edge of the mat, I would try to basically pretend like there's a golf ball on the edge of the mat, and I'm facing this way as if I'm going to be swinging toward the wall here, but I'm swinging in that direction. So that's going to give me the feeling I'm swinging out 90 degrees. So it's a really, really big exaggeration. So I try to get some swings feeling that. And then what I do is I try to set up to a golf ball and have that same feeling that I'm swinging so much from the inside. And that's going to help you get rid of that over the top. So if you search over the top on the website using the search bar, that drill will come up. I believe it's a video. It's called Why You Come Over the Top and How to Stop, or something like that. That's one of my favorite drills. It's one that I prescribe to a lot of students to help them fix that over the top. And it works really well because it really, really exaggerates it. And then I would check out our Never Slice Again section to get rid of that. All right, so Murray W says, what's a good drill to stop flipping? The move. So the main reason why most people flip is because they come down steep in the downswing. So they're like this. And when you're like this, you have to shallow out the club late. And when you shallow out the club late, you stand up, and then you have to flip at the ball. So the number one thing is going to be the move, but you might be shallowing out the club. And if that's the case, casting, you might be generating some lag in the downswing. You might be shallowing out the club, and you might be getting some lag. At that point, it's how you're delivering the club to the golf ball. You're with your hands. You're used to squaring up the face by pushing the club through, by doing this. You need to get used to squaring up the face by doing this. So that's going to be the move and the straight line release section. So there's no way for me to know for sure what's going to be best for you without looking at your swing. But I can tell you the number one thing I see is shallowing out the club, getting that club to shallow out and squaring the face early. That's really the best thing. I want to mention real quick, I just mentioned, there's no way for me to know without seeing your swing. I believe I do have a few spots left available in my swing reviews. So if you want to sign up for my swing reviews, I can take a look at your swing and tell you exactly what you need to do to get rid of that flip. All right. So Dwayne says, how to make yourself finish the swing. Any special drills? So yeah, there's some great drills out there. The main thing that I see with people who have trouble finishing their swing is that they don't get that right leg off the ground. So the trail leg, they come in and they keep that heel on the ground, and then they're like this and they can't finish their swing. So if you keep that right heel, or the trail heel, on the ground, it acts as an anchor for your hips. You can't keep rotating your hips. So when you're coming through, you got to loosen up that heel and let it come all the way up. You should, if you're looking from down the line. So if you're looking, angle this down a little bit more. So if you're looking from this angle, as I'm coming through the swing, you should be able to see all the spikes on the bottom of my shoe. So if you're looking you should be able to see all these spikes right here. So make sure that you're loosening up that right heel to allow, or that trail heel, to allow yourself to come all the way through. Because if you don't, those hips are just going to stay locked. And if you can't rotate your hips, you're not going to be able to rotate your shoulders enough. You're not going to be able, you're basically just going to finish your swing like this instead of coming all the way through like that. So I would take a look at that, make sure that your right heel is coming off the ground. there's a, I mean, search finish on the website. There's going to be some great drills on there, but that's really the number one thing that I see. All right, let me get a drink real quick. So JBS says, I hit everything off the toe, even on chip shots. What do you think could be happening? So the number one thing that I see with toe shots is you're pulling up. So you're coming up out of it, which can also cause heel strikes, because when you come up out of it, your hips are moving toward the ball. So it just depends on which one, is causing it. But the thing I would tell you, the easiest thing is going to be try to hit the ball off the heel. If you set up the way you normally would, intentionally hit the ball off the heel, it's going to move that strike closer to the center. That's just going to be the easiest thing to do. So it might just be that there may not be anything going on. It might just be that your feel is just off and you need to calibrate it. So I would just be getting yourself to intentionally hit the ball off the heel, move that strike closer to the center, and that will help you start hitting some more solid shots, even chip shots. All right, so Samit P says, any drills for collapsing at the top, losing grip control? So one, if you're losing grip control, I would make sure that your grip is good. So the main thing for that is you just don't want to have the long thumb. So what that means, if I have a long thumb, that's like this. So I'm just basically kind of holding it like that. Well, what you want to have is what we call a short thumb, and that's where it's, the end of your thumb is maybe just a little bit past your fingers. And then you see what that does. If I go from a short thumb to a long thumb, it spreads my fingers out more on the grip. Now, you don't want to have it in the lifeline of your hand like you are putting, like that. But to have that, there's a bone right here on your wrist. You want that butt end of the club, or the edge of the club there, to be right under that, and then right on your trigger finger there. So that's going to be pretty much a perfect position there with the shaft, or with the grip, and that'll allow you to get maximum coverage on the grip and control. The other thing is that everyone's trying to lose so much tension, which can work against you if you're trying to get speed and control the club. So realize that you've got to hold the club with more pressure as the speed increases in the swing. So as you're bringing up the top, it's getting faster. So you have to put more force into the handle in order to be able to control it. So in that first few fingers of the hand, that's where you want to be putting those. There's a great video on the website. Search grip pressure, and there'll be a crazy detail video where Clay talks about the entire swing and where the kind of grip pressures that you want. So it's like a 10-minute video. I can't go into 10 minutes on here about grip pressure, but I definitely check that out. I think it'll give you a better understanding. All right, so Jason J says, actually, almost skipped James H here. Sorry about that. So James H says, bowing the left wrist on the downswing rather than intentionally rolling wrist. It seems to me that this is happening automatically if you are releasing the club. So again, not really a question, more of what it seems to be like a statement. So for people who are used to flipping the club and squaring up the face by kind of doing this, it's going to feel, if you're doing this and squaring up that face early, turning the handle down, it's likely going to feel like you're getting no rotation. The hands aren't rolling over at all because they're rolling over so much less than what they were before. So if you're squaring up the face early, more of what's coming into impact is more just arm, or is just body rotation. So now I'm coming into impact, my face is square at a forward shaft lean, and I'm rolling over. Whereas most people before, who are flipping and squaring the club face by doing this, their hands are rolling over big time, and their body is pretty much squared up to the ball, and they're releasing early. So if you're someone who did that and now you're going to this, it's going to feel like you're not rolling over at all, because it's so much less, rolling over than what you were doing before, because that's what you were doing to square the face. So it wasn't really a question there, but I hope I kind of explained what he was getting at there. Jason J says, I have slow wrists and block the ball frequently. local instructor mentioned to go with a standard grip instead of a jumbo. Will smaller grips help the face control close quicker? The only thing about like a bigger grip is that it's harder to move the wrists when you have a bigger grip. Honestly, I don't know that will really make much of a difference. At least in my experience, I haven't found players that have gone to a bigger grip or a smaller grip. And in my experience, just using different size grips, it's made little to no difference. It's just about the feel of the club, the connection between you and the club. That's really the only difference. And it's a comfort thing. I would say for you, it's just if you're having trouble squaring up that face or leaving that face open, you're going to want to, it's 1.2 from the move. It's just getting the feeling. So if I have the face pointing straight up and my palm is pointing straight up, you want to get the feeling that you're closing the face by turning. See how my wrist is turning? It's bowing. That's closing the face. So that's what you want to get. You want to get that club face closing, and then you're coming into impact with a square club face. That's what I would try to feel. And in fact, I feel like, since having a jumbo grip makes it so it's a little, maybe slightly harder to move your wrists because it's a bigger thing to hold on to, that might actually make it tougher to do that. So before you spend any money changing all your grips, what I would recommend doing is working on that 1.2 from the move and turning that handle down to get that club face to square up. All right, so Paul H says, I hit my irons good, but I sometimes shank. Am I coming too far from the inside? So it's really impossible to say, but I would say that probably has to do with it. Like I said, when I see shanks are almost always a cause of the hips moving toward the ball. So if here's you can see my backside's on the edge of the vent there. If I'm coming into impact, I see that, and that removes the space for your hands to move through. Your hands move closer to the golf ball, and you get shanks. The hosel gets closer to the ball. So I try to feel like as you're coming down that you're sitting down more into it and you're turning the hips more. Lots of shank videos on the website. Just search shank, but there's some good drills where it's kind of doing that. But yeah, working the club from the inside a lot it's going to have that hosel flying toward the ball. So the feeling of sitting back more and keeping your hips back more, having that space, and then also maybe a feeling of coming over the top a little bit. Now, you're not actually coming over the top. It's just a feeling to get the club working more down the plane instead of so much from the inside. Can help you get rid of those shanks. But I'd check out, there's a great shank video. Just search shank, and there's a video where in the thumbnail of the video, it's like a club face, and there's a bunch of red dots on it. That's a good one. That's probably my favorite one on the site for shank. So I'd check that one out. All right. Jim D says, I'm losing my posture goat humping. So again, not really a question, more of a statement. If you're, that comes back down to shallowing. The most common thing I see is if you're doing this and losing your posture, kind of goat humping as you're coming through there, it's usually a product of the club coming down steep, and then you're having to get it back down on plane and you stand up out of it. So the move, I take a look at that. If you want specific help on that, it's hard for me to know exactly why you may be doing something, but that's the most common thing I see is the club's coming down steep and you shallow it out late and you stand up out of it and you kind of get the goat hump as you're coming through there. All right, so last question here. We got about 1 minute left. Rick B, and I apologize if I wasn't able to answer your question. I try to get through these as quickly as I can. We're back. We're here every single weekday. So come check us out. And if you're in Unlimited Swing Reviews, you're gonna get an email from me. If you ask me a question through email, I'm gonna answer it back within 24 hours. You're gonna get an email from me, or maybe I'll go over it in a swing review or something like that. So if you're really wanting to get your questions answered all the time, that's going to be the best way to do it. But these office hours is also a good way. So last question here, Rick B says, I struggle with the proper release. I've heard the wrist should be relaxed, but that tends to result in a flippy action through the ball. If I'm firm with them, it would seem I would lose some club head speed help. So that basically comes down to this again. So if you're releasing the club early, you do want to have you do want to be more relaxed with the arms as you're coming through there. You don't want to be necessarily like super flexing, because if you're really tense with your arms and everything as you're coming through, you're just not going to move as fast as you're coming through there. So you don't necessarily want to be as tense, but you do want to have a firm pressure on the grip. So I think that's kind of where you're at with it. Everyone's feels are a little bit different, and what feels firm and relaxed to me may be different to you. But what it comes down to is if you're releasing that club early and you're getting that flippy action, it usually has something to do with shallowing out the club, casting the club, or how your hands release the club to the ball. So what you're going to want to look at is, number one, are you shallowing out the club? Is this club in the downswing, is it pointing more down toward the golf ball, or is it pointing more inside the golf ball? If you are more inside the golf ball, you're going to want to go to the move section and work through those drills. Get that club face, get that shaft shallowing out, get that club face squaring early. Now, if you are shallowing out the club and you see you're releasing from the top, so what that means is you're getting the club to the top. You have this angle here between your arm and your shaft. And as you're starting down, you're doing this. You're losing that angle from the very beginning. You're casting. You're going to want to work through the top speed lag section. But let's say that you're shallowing out the club, squaring the face early. You're also generating lag in the downswing and then releasing. At that point, if you're releasing early, it's just how your hands are used to squaring up the face. So you're used to coming into impact by really throwing the right hand at it and squaring up the face, instead of rotating through, squaring the face by turning the handle back and having forward shaft lean as you're coming through there and releasing it out in front. Those are really the big three pieces. If you're most likely, if you're not releasing the club properly, you're not doing one of those things or all of those things. So I definitely check those out. And if you'd like help with that, again, Unlimited Swing Reviews, I'll be happy to help you all. So again, sorry I wasn't able to answer everybody's questions, but we'll be back here tomorrow at 9 a.m. sharp. And I will talk to you then. Thanks, everybody, for joining me.